My name is Heike Dorr, Principal Analyst with S&P Global Market Intelligence, and I'm joined with Bob Frenzel, President and Chief Operating Officer of Xcel Energy. Bob, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us today. We have a lot to cover and only 30 minutes, so let's see how many of these questions we can get through. We'll jump right in. Let's start with a quick synopsis of Xcel for those that may not be as familiar with the company.
Hey, good morning, Heike, and good morning, everybody out there in conference land. I've probably been to a dozen of these in person over the years, and this will be probably the strangest we had. And I keep saying that we're going to say that all of 2020, and hope sometime in 2021, maybe we won't be able to say this is the strangest conference that I've been to. Thanks for having me, and thanks for letting me talk about something I'm super passionate about, which is Xcel Energy. We are a $50 billion company, multi-state gas and electric utility, who serves customers throughout the Southwest and Upper Midwest, 5.5 million customers, 150-year history as a company. And as we are guided by over the next decade, as we think through the transformation that's happening in our industry, we're guided really by three strategic priorities. One is to lead a clean energy transition that's going on in the country. We recognize the importance of our customers, and we're going to continue to enhance the customer experience for all 5.5 million of ours. And we're going to do everything we can to keep our product affordable and available and reliable to them over that same time period. And that's what guides us every single day when we come to work at Xcel Energy.
Can we please put slide 1 on the screen for us? So, Bob, here's a look of where the company is. We can see that you guys are operating in Texas. As Kurt mentioned, our conference theme is navigating a turbulent landscape. And it's been a little turbulent down in Texas the last couple of weeks. I wonder, as we kick things off, if you could maybe give us a quick update on how Southwestern Public Service has fared these last couple of weeks. How are your employees and your customers doing? How are things down there?
Yeah, sure. So a couple comments around Texas broadly. In my mind, Heike, last week's catastrophic winter storm was devastating, not only to the 4 million customers that lost their power, potentially heat and even water. The state of Texas, which is 25 million people, and then the Storm Uri really impacted a bulk of the Midwest companies. Everywhere up to our Minnesota company and everywhere down to our Texas company. Broadly speaking, our SPS company performed exceptionally well during the storm. Much like Kurt said in the introduction about El Paso Electric, in 2011, we had a lot of lessons learned from winterization, from a very deep cold event in 2011, and our power plants performed exceptionally well. Much like many of the companies in ERCOT, though, we struggled to get some natural gas to some of our natural gas-fired power plants, and some of them were unable to run. But we were broadly exporting power to the Southwest Power Pool from our SPS company. We exported power from our Northern States Power Company into MISO. And even in Colorado, our company was exporting power to the broader state through the crisis. So our plants ran exceptionally well, and we were happy to support our neighbors like this industry has a hallmark of doing.
Incidents like this really highlight the benefits that companies that operate in multi-jurisdictions really have in not only getting their own utilities back up and running, but also being able to help those communities surround where they serve. So it's great to hear that your company was nimble enough to be able to help those others around you as well. If we could please put slide 2 up. We know that Xcel has a goal of reducing carbon emissions by 80% by 2030 and 100% carbon-free electricity by 2050. These are amazing targets, and I think it's something that the investment community has been really interested in. And so I'd love for us to discuss a little bit how these milestones are going to be achieved. Can we start with talking about how you plan on phasing out your coal portfolio?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that it's not new to us either. Roll the clock back 15 years, and we had over 8,000 megawatts of coal in our system. By the end of 2030, we expect to have less than 2,000 megawatts of coal in our system. Most of those plant closures have come through long lead time notifications to our communities, partnering with our employees in the local bargaining units to make sure that the transition was made effectively. And through the process, we haven't had any layoffs as part of those transitions. And we've had actions to support our communities to maintain property base, and the local communities have remained intact. So we think partnering is the best way to do this. We partner with stakeholders, regulators, to make sure that we can transition the coal fleet to what is significantly going to be a much more renewables fleet, as you can see from this graphic. We're proud to say that we've been a leading wind provider in the United States for the past 15 years, and we're one of two utility companies that have crossed 10,000 megawatts of wind on our system in that same time. So we've been able to integrate wind into our system very effectively and provided that in both emissions and cost benefit to our customers over the past 15 years.
And can you talk a little bit about what portion of your assumptions going from now to 2030 have been um, already approved, and which part of this is proposed that still requires you jumping through some regulatory hurdles to reach the finish line?
Yeah, it's a great question. We obviously partner closely with our regulators, but by and large, this plan for us to go from where we sit today to 2030 is largely regulatory approved. We've got a resource plan up here in the upper Midwest where we're asking the regulators to approve the final shutdown, or the shutdown of our final two coal plants in the upper Midwest. And, I know we'll talk about this at some point today, but in about 2 hours, we're going to make an announcement in partnership with our president of Colorado and the governor of Colorado. Are going to announce the framework for our Colorado energy plan that's going to get announced this afternoon. It's going to talk about early retirements of coal plants, the incremental additions of renewables and storage to make our Colorado company have an 80% carbon reduction by the end of the decade.
Is there one state where you're farther along than the others as far as what your goals are for carbon reduction? Has there been a regulatory climate that's been kind of more constructive early on that has allowed you to make headway in a certain jurisdiction faster than the others?
I think we've been leading providers of wind for 15 years. I think by and large, that's happened predominantly in the upper Midwest and in Colorado. We are fortunate, Heike, to sit in some of the windiest areas of the country and some of the best solar resources as well. And making this transition on behalf of our customers to a lower emissions profile is also being done very cost effectively because of the resource rich areas that we serve. And we've been able to keep our bills to our customers flat for the past 5 years. And we expect, as we roll the clock forward to the end of the decade, that we'll be able to make this entire transition for less than the rate of increase than inflation.
That's really amazing. Let's talk a little bit about how you're replacing some of this coal power. Let's talk a little bit about wind and solar. I know that the company recently increased its capex plan because you have a few more projects that you're bringing online that you didn't have earlier. Can we talk about some of these projects?
Sure, happily. I think what you're referring to is what we call the Minnesota Relief and Recovery Act. And it really stemmed from the sort of catastrophe that occurred because of the pandemic and the economic slowdown in our states. We recognized that we had opportunity to repower some legacy wind farms, put people to work, put capital to work in our local communities. So we're going to repower 4 existing wind farms, and we're also proposing to add almost 500 megawatts of solar at a legacy coal plant that we're proposing to shut down over the next decade. And so the combination of wind and solar in the upper Midwest is going to be about $1.5 billion of investment. A billion of that has already been approved, and we've probably got another $1 billion of investment to make in addition to some of the solar assets that I referenced.
And what are the biggest risks to a plan like this? It's quite difficult to predict what things are going to look like in 2030. Some of this involves the planning of future future generation facilities being wound down. Some of it involves the construction of other things being built up. Where are the biggest risks to this project, to this kind of series of projects that we're talking about?
Look, I think the conversation that's happening nationally, Heike, around the challenges that we saw down in ERCOT over the past week is really informative about how we think about making this transition. We have to do it with exceptional planning, with a focus on both reliability and affordability. We have to recognize that we're planning for resiliency for a world that's got more challenges due to climate change than maybe we have in the past. So what used to be a 1 in 30 year weather event, maybe a 1 in 10 year weather event. We need to make sure that our systems are hardened for that. And that means both on the generation side, but also on the transmission side. We see a lot of interdependencies there. And I think we have to recognize the interdependency we have on the electric business and the natural gas business. I think some of the challenges we saw in Texas highlighted that relationship, that the supply chain for fuel is critically important on the resiliency perspective as well as the generation side. So as we make these transitions, we're focused on keeping it affordable and reliable to our customers, which means that we're likely going to need storage as an asset class. We're going to need to preserve our existing nuclear power plants, and we've filed for that with our Minnesota regulator. And we're going to need to, continue to use natural gas as a bridge fuel to making sure that we're resilient. And over time, longer dated stuff is we need to replace and find carbon-free resources that can be dispatchable as we transition away from fossil fuels by the end of 2050.